We are back on Inside Politics. Our guest today is Dr. Steve Dickerson, state senator from here in Nashville. Dr. Dickerson, the fiscal note on that Natural Marriage Defense Act was the state could lose up to $8 billion or more if it implemented this.
Right.
Is that one of the reasons? I mean, I know you hadn't focused on this, but as a lawmaker, would that be of great concern to you that this would be no reason why? There may be a way of fighting this, but that's not the way to do it.
Well, I'll say this: we have a state budget of $33 billion, and when you look at a fiscal note of $8 billion, that is a significant amount of our operating expense, and would really cripple the state.
Now, you're also sponsoring a bill this time regarding the death penalty, and particular on DNA. Tell us what that legislation's about.
Sure. In Tennessee right now, it is not mandated that evidence be retained in circumstances where an individual is given the death penalty. In Tennessee, the average person resides on death row for 20 to 30 years. And so if there's some evidence, maybe it's a glove, or maybe it's a shirt with some blood on it, for example, it's not required that that be kept around. The problem is forensic science is advancing very quickly, and so all this bill would say is that if there is potential DNA evidence, it just be kept as long as that individual's in prison.
Going a little further, there are lots of situations where sometimes we find somebody who's already in prison. When they check their DNA, it matches somebody that might have been involved, and if they may have been involved in a crime they haven't been charged with.
Right.
Do you see a need to have a DNA registry that goes beyond just death penalty people who've been convicted of that? Should we go that for people convicted of all felonies in Tennessee, or those serving time within prison for violent crimes?
I think that certainly goes further than I anticipated, and I think that's maybe a discussion for another day. I think the real issue, though, is with capital crimes, people who have been sentenced to death. This is such a there's such finality to it that I think giving the opportunity to keep that DNA around is the least we can do, and we really only sentence a couple of people a year in Tennessee to the death penalty, and so the expense associated with this is minimal.
Because of those problems with sometimes people being convicted, perhaps even executed, and we find out later, no, they really didn't do this crime, and they've been executed for it. What are your thoughts in general about keeping the death penalty in Tennessee? Lots of states and other nations have gotten rid of the death penalty, but Tennessee still has it.
Right. I think that's a discussion that's ongoing. I know, as you said, nationwide, it's becoming less and less popular. At this point, I'm not really prepared to come out and have that discussion personally, but what I'm really trying to do is make sure we're as precise as possible, make sure that when we have a conviction, we keep the evidence around, and that evidence actually cuts both ways. Sometimes you can use it to exonerate somebody, but in fact, sometimes you can find other people. You may have the criminal on the street, and this helps convict somebody.
Now, we've talked today about a lot of legislation that you're sponsoring this term. Is making birth control more accessible, legalizing marijuana for medicinal purposes, the death penalty and DNA that we just talked about. Those don't sound like issues that Republican lawmakers sponsor bills about in those areas. Do you have any of your Republican colleagues asking you what your bona fides are for being a member of the GOP?
I got to tell you, I think these are actually very Republican ideas, and we can go case by case, but in terms of my conviction that we need to focus on commerce and education and an efficient government, all these fit somewhere in those kind of three principles. And you think about it, really, I'm trying to enhance personal freedom and governmental accountability, and I think all three of these bills really move in that direction.
You talk a lot about sort of what a Republican is. There's a major fight going on in the Republican Party about who's going to be their presidential nominee. There's a presidential primary coming up in Tennessee March 1st. I suspect as an elected official you've been asked to give endorsements or support somebody. Are you supporting anybody in the March 1st presidential primary?
I have chosen to stay silent on that one.
You're on the ballot later this year in November, up for re-election. Are you comfortable with being on the same ballot, the GOP ticket, with any of the presidential candidates that could possibly be there? Would you be comfortable with Donald Trump?
I really don't have a choice in the matter, so I'm going to run. I'm going to take care of my business, whether it's meeting the voters, whether it's talking to my constituents, whether it's knocking on doors, and whoever's up there, I'm still going to run and try to bring the same representation of the 20th district.
But whoever is the Republican candidate, you don't have a choice being on the ballot with them, but you will be supportive of them, at least in terms of not being supportive of the Democrat involved in this. Is that right?
I'd say that's fair to say.
One other medical question that has come up quite a bit in terms of legislation. John J. Hooker has been pushing his Death with Dignity bill. That's a bill that speaks directly to you because it would allow a physician to be involved in a right to death sort of situation for one of their patients. Do you support that particular legislation? Are you sponsoring it in any way in the Senate?
No, I'm not. And actually, he's what a great man he is. He came to me. We had lunch. We discussed it. One of the concerns that people have when they get the diagnosis they're terminally ill is that they suffer, that they have pain that's untreatable. Of course, actually, medical cannabis would be one option to help ameliorate that. Additionally, we have plenty of physicians are involved with palliative care that can help.
Would you vote for the bill if it came up on the Senate floor or in committee before you?
No, and I don't anticipate it coming up for a vote, but actually that's not a bill I'd support.
Are you expecting a strong Democratic challenge to try to take back your seat? You are up for election first in August. I don't know if you'll have any primary opposition, but will you expect some in November?
I think it's safe to expect a primary and a general election and plan accordingly. And if I don't get one or the other, then I'll just, I'll have a lot easier summer.
Very quickly, one of the issues that lawmakers from Nashville are always in the middle of, it seems that Nashville wants to do things to deal with their urban problems like affordable housing or guns in parks or some other issues. Right. They want to do some things, but there are members in the legislature, particularly from surrounding counties here, who want to say, well, first you've got to come get state approval or we won't let you do that. Right. Where do you come down on that? What should Nashville be allowed to do without having to go get permission from the state?
That's a really broad question, and it's sort of a case-by-case answer, but in general, I would defer authority to the local government over the state when possible.
So for affordable housing or things like that?
Right. I know there's a bill. I've actually have not read that bill either, but in general, again, I would default to local autonomy.
Senator Dickerson, thank you for coming on the show. We'll probably have you back in future time. We come through as the legislature continues later this year.
Right, thank you.
And thank you for joining us on Inside Politics this week. Hope you can be back here again for a future show. If you can't get enough politics in the meantime, go to the News Channel 5 website. You'll find my Capitol View commentary there. There's a new commentary posted every Friday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you back here next time. Goodbye.